For the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. James, could I have a roll call, please?
Marcy Baker.
Here.
Kim Blackerby.
Here.
Josh Brainerd.
Here.
Patty Crowan.
Here.
Lenny Nelson. Miles Schlesinger.
Here.
McNeil Smith.
Here.
Okay, before we get to agenda changes and revisions, we have a new planning commissioner who's just been seated this evening, who's approved by the city council at their last meeting. So welcome. We're going to call you Mac, right?
Yeah. Easier than pronouncing that.
Okay. Would you just give us a snapshot, couple sentences of why you're here?
Okay. I'm here because first of all, because the city council agreed I could be here. I'm really invested in the long-term growth of Lincoln City. I'm a homeowner. I'm a resident. I'm a business owner here. And not as some of the people on this, not been here as long as some of the people on this board, but plan to be here for a while, and got a long history of law using. I think dovetails quite nicely with what we're doing here, and yeah, looking forward to being here.
Great. Well, welcome. We'll see how you feel about it in a couple months. Okay. We lost our planning director.
We're having an issue with the microphones.
Oh.
All of them?
All of this sounds, or am I just loud?
I can hear you.
I can hear an echo, yeah. Hello, testing, testing. Okay. All right. Be a rock star and talk right into your mic, all right?
Outdoor voice.
Outdoor voice. Do we have any agenda changes or revisions, Anne-Marie?
We do not have any agenda changes.
Okay. So we have the minutes from our regular meeting of February 4th, 2020. I know all of my commissioners have had a chance to review them. Do we have any changes, corrections?
I had one.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
On the, it's page 3, the last, it said I voted aye, and I actually was late. It was correct that I walked in at 6:04, but it's here the final order for CPU 21905, Devils Lake RV. I was not here to vote on that one. I walked in right after, so I was absent for that.
Okay. We can make that correction?
That was my only one.
Thank you. All right. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes with that correction?
I so move.
Okay. You have to use your mic now, Miles.
I move to approve the minutes.
All right. And a second?
I second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Minutes are done. We have two final orders for signature here, so I need a motion and a second and a vote. The first one is the final order for CUP 2020-01 and SPR 2020-01, which is the conditional use permit and site plan design review for the new Northwest Natural Resource Center at 2815 Northeast 36th Drive. So, and I don't believe you can vote on this.
Yeah, I was going to say I wasn't here for the deliberations, and I was appointed after you guys had the meeting on this, so I should be sitting this one out.
Okay, sounds good. So do I have a motion to accept the final order?
I'll move to approve final order 2020-03.
Okay,
Is that enough?
that's enough.
Yep.
And a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The second one is a final order 2020-02 for APP 2020-01. That was Lawson et al. Appeal. of the Eclavia, I know I just mangled that name, dwelling as an unlimited use vacation rental dwelling. Same thing applies for UMAC on this one. Do I have a motion to accept?
Move to approve the final order for 2020-2 loss and appeal of Eclavia VRD.
Thank you. You got it right. And do I have a second?
I second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving on. It is now 6:06, and this is the public hearing for files CPA and ZC 2020. It is now open. This public hearing concerns a request to amend the comprehensive plan map and the zoning map to change the properties addressed at 305 Southwest Ebb Avenue, 315 Southwest Ebb Avenue, 327 Southwest Ebb Avenue, 339-343 Southwest Ebb Avenue, 405 Southwest Ebb Avenue, a parcel that is unaddressed, 427 Southwest Ebb Avenue, and 887 Southwest 5th Street, going from a comprehensive plan designation of high-density residential district RM to recreation commercial district RC, and from zoning of multifamily residential RM zone to recreation commercial RC zone. The applicants and the property owners are Michael B. Test and Jean L. Celia, Eugene L. and Karen L. Scrutton, Robert Glanville, Coast Commercial Associates LLC, Monica Steele, and Eric W. Coates and Robin L. Coates, who are trustees. The Commission must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. First of all, does any member of the Commission wish to declare an ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias in this matter?
I need to declare I did work for Jean and Karen Scrutton about, I'm going to guess, 5 or 6 years ago for a summer at the Whistling Winds Motel.
Okay. You like her? Okay. Okay. All right. And would that have any bearing on your decision here?
Won't affect my ability to make the decision based off the criteria.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the qualifications of a commissioner to participate in this matter? Nope. Okay. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the City Code and ORS 197.7635. The staff will now read the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. Anne Marie?
The applicable substantive criteria are the Oregon statewide planning goals, the Lincoln City Comprehensive Plan, and the applicable provisions of Lincoln City Municipal Code Title 17.
Thank you. Okay, so all testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria that Anne Marie just listed, or such other criteria in the plan or land use regulations which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision makers to respond to the issue precludes any action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the end of this hearing, any person who participated may request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence. Before the staff presents a report, I need to summarize the public hearing procedures here, which have been adopted by the Planning Commission and City Council. A summary of the public hearing procedures is on the table by the entrance to the council chambers. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: these preliminary matters and required statements, then a staff report. The commissioners will have questions of staff. Then we'll have the applicant's presentation. Those in favor of the application will be invited to speak, those who are neutral, and then those opposed. Then that'll be followed by any testimony from public officials or agencies, and then a rebuttal by the applicant, any requests of continuance or to leave the record open, close of the hearing, followed by close of the record, request to submit written argument, and then deliberations, and finally decision. The city has established some time limits. The applicant will have 15 minutes and may reserve up to 5 minutes of that time for rebuttal. After the applicant testifies, any person may speak for up to 3 minutes. If the Planning Commission has questions, your time responding to those questions isn't counted against your total time. If you wish to speak, please print your name and your mailing address clearly on the sign-up sheet at the table at the entrance. When you're coming forward to speak, we need you to speak clearly into the microphone and begin by stating just your name. If you have any written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy of it to James. Okay, we're ready for a staff report. Anne Marie, please.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Anne Marie Skinner. I'm with the Planning and Community Development Department. As has been stated, this is case file CPA and ZC 2020-01. I will not review again the applicants and property owners because they have already been stated very nicely by the Chair, as has the situs addresses. I will refer you to the screen, and I will point out the subject property. It consists of 8 tax lots, and it is bounded by Southwest 3rd on the north, Southwest 5th on the south, Pacific Ocean on the west, and Southwest Ebb Avenue on the east. And so it is these 8 tax lots that is the topic of this case before you tonight. In sum, they total 2.06 acres. They are currently in the multiple family residential zone in the high density residential district designation in the comprehensive plan map. And the request, as has been stated, is to change that comprehensive plan designation to the commercial recreation district with a zone of recreation commercial. For the surrounding uses and zones, I'm going to pull up the zoning map. To the north of the subject site, we have recreation commercial zoning, and these are residences right here. To the east of the site, this is general commercial zoning with mostly commercial. There are some residences in that mix. And to the south of the site is multifamily residential zoning with residential uses. Another overall, and this is just a picture. Oh. Well, it's not going to let me. So I'll just go back to the zoning map. If, never mind. The application was received on December 19th, 2019, and it was deemed complete on January 6, 2020. Notice of the public hearings was mailed on January 28th, 2020, and the notice of the public hearings was published in the NewsGuard on February 5th, 2020. The southwesternmost portion of the site is in the distant tsunami evacuation zone. The remainder of the site is in the local tsunami evacuation zone. And I have another map showing that. this is, in this case, this is north, this is west. The southwesternmost portion of the site is in the VE flood hazard area. And that blue with the white dots represents the VE flood hazard area. The green hatched is flood zone X, and that is not a flood hazard area.
And that yellowish.
The yellow stands for the local tsunami zone, and then the orange is the distant tsunami zone. The site contains no wetlands, no significant wetlands, no delineated wetlands, and no significant riparian areas. The site does not contain any known historical or cultural resources. The portion of Southwest 3rd Street immediately abutting the site, so this portion right here, this little rectangle that the cursor is going around, represents an aesthetic resource. It's public right-of-way, so I'm not sure how much of an aesthetic resource that can be, but it shows as an aesthetic resource on the map. But the site itself does not contain any aesthetic resources. The entire site is in the bluff erosion zones. The gray signifies active erosion. The red is high hazard. The yellow is moderate hazard. And the green is low hazard. If there is no color, then that means it is outside of the zone. So the subject property is here, following the cursor. So this portion at the very southeasternmost end is not in any bluff hazard erosion zone. The city's comprehensive plan provides for major and minor revisions. Major revisions are changes to the comprehensive plan and zoning map that have a widespread and significant impact upon the immediate area of the change, such as quantitative changes or qualitative changes in the character of the land use itself, such as conversion of residential to commercial land use, or a spatial change that affects large areas or many different ownerships. Staff considers this to be a major revision, since the requested change from multiple family residential to recreation commercial zoning would produce a qualitative change in the character of the land use itself from residential to commercial, as well as being a spatial change, since the request includes 8 tax lots with different ownerships. Therefore, the proposed amendment must conform to the statewide planning goals and be consistent and compatible with other unamended portions of the comprehensive plan. If rezoned, the property owners may use the tax lots for any use the recreation commercial zone permits. In the RC zone, there are a number of examples of uses which meet the intent of the zone: motels and resorts, eating and drinking establishments, gift shops, convention centers, single-family dwellings and duplexes, timeshare units, bed and breakfast accommodations, attached single-family dwellings, manufactured homes, essential emergency communications, community gardens and market gardens, mixed-use development, transportation uses, tiny house developments, 4-flat dwellings, and vacation rental dwellings. The comprehensive plan has a number of goals that would need to be satisfied, along with the statewide planning goals. The goals are listed in the staff report, with staff's assessment as to whether or not those goals are satisfied. There is a land use planning goal, which staff has assessed as being not satisfied. Citizen involvement goal is the second goal, which is satisfied. Public services and utilities goal, generally satisfied. Urbanization goal is satisfied. The natural hazard goal, not satisfied. The housing goal is not consistent with goal 6. It is consistent with the economic goal. The aesthetic goal is not applicable or not satisfied. Transportation goal is satisfied for vehicular traffic. Energy goal is partially satisfied. Overall environmental goal is satisfied. Goal 12 with shoreland, beaches, dunes, estuary, and ocean resources goal is satisfied. And then the statewide planning goals are similar to the comprehensive planning goals, and those are listed in the staff report with whether or not they're consistent or inconsistent. And I am ready for any questions regarding the staff report.
Commissioners, questions?
I had one quick, it says there's 8 tax lots and 5 different ownerships,
Mm-hmm.
that there are 6 applicants. So I'm just kind of confused.
Well, perhaps 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
One of them's Coast Commercial Associates, so maybe that,
It's because that should say 6 instead of 5.
yeah, just was curious about the technicality. Okay. I was wondering why there were more applicants than that. Thank you. Sorry. Catch.
Are any of these currently licensed VRDs? Is that your question?
I will have to check, which I can do while the applicant is presenting, and then I will let you know.
Okay. Okay. Other questions?
Question. So under the land use planning goal, staff suggested that it was not consistent with the surrounding, and there was a note that it was because, and I think it was the map you were trying to pull up, that there is no recreational commercial zoning from Southwest 3rd, the north end of these properties, to Southwest 36th Street. But
Correct.
what my question was, with everything to the east being zoned commercial, north and south are different zonings, and the one they're requesting is the same as the north?
It is directly
So
adjacent
how
to the
was
north.
how was that decision made by staff that to go with, looking at the R1, since it is right on the border? I was just kind of curious.
Staff was just looking at the border, everything from the border to where
Right.
the next recreation commercial was, and in that entire area from north to south, east to west, there was just no recreation commercial.
Okay.
The bulk of recreation commercial is to the north of Southwest 3rd.
So it's just essentially that these properties are the north border of that.
Right.
Other questions? Any? Okay. Thank you. Applicant's presentation, please. I don't know, you look vaguely familiar to me. You look vaguely familiar.
Yeah, I feel fairly comfortable in this seat.
I bet.
Yeah. One thing I would like to ask a little bit of indulgence. The staff report raises a lot of points, and I'm not sure I can address all of them in 15 minutes, but I will do my best, but it's possible we may run over a little bit. Just so
You know the rules.
Please indulge. And if I run out of time, somebody please ask me about all the stuff I didn't address.
The other things you didn't address? Sure. Okay.
But for the record, I'm Richard Townsend, Townsend Planning and Design. I'm here on behalf of the Scruttons and the other applicants. With me is
Karen Scrutton.
Oh. There's a lot of things raised in the staff report. I just want to point out a couple of things at the outset. One is that, as has been mentioned, to the north is the RC zone, all the way along here. This line, the lot line is 450 feet long. So that 450 feet abutting between commercial and the existing recreational zone there. If the zoning is changed, there will just be basically 130 feet abutment between the commercial and recreational, or commercial and residential zoning. So we're actually reducing the interface between the two kinds of zones. So by 70%, if you want to know. So one other thing I want to point out briefly. You may have noticed that in the materials, the application materials, we refer to an acre of land being rezoned, and the staff report says a little bit over 2. The reason for that is I got my figures from the county assessor's office, and they only count, like for taxation and so on, the part up on the bluff. These 4 lots down here have about an acre of land that's down on the beach and is not developable, not taxed again. So I just want to, when I'm referring to an acre, I'm talking about that acre that's up on the top there. So also, one other thing I just want to mention is it does have RM zoning, multifamily zoning. It's had that for many, many years. No one's tried to do multifamily development there. It's pretty valuable land for multifamily. It's the assessors have the total value for those 8 acres is $2.8 million, or not 8 acres, 8 lots, 1 acre, $2.8 million for the value of that 1 acre. If you compare that to the 3 most recent apartment developments that have been built in Lincoln City, their average price land value per acre was about $400,000. That's 1/7 of the value of this land. Possibility of this land being developed for recreation commercial is really, really slim. As you can see, it's long and narrow. It's very valuable. It's long and narrow. Because of the standards for the RM zone, there's a 20-foot setback along ebb. So you lose 9,000 square feet for the setback. You've got the geological setback on the other side. That, if it's typical of most of the rest of Lincoln City, the geological setback would end up being another 20 feet, so another 9,000 square feet comes off. And then what's left in that, what's now down to a little more than half an acre, you've got to get in whatever dwelling units you can, the required parking for them, the required recreational area for them, 250 square feet per unit, the required landscaping, and there's a whole calculus that goes in, but you're going to get down to a fairly small number of dwelling units, which would have to command an extremely high price to be affordable. So, again, as I say, it's unlikely that you would see apartment development here. It's really not suited for apartment development. But to the extent someone might find it desirable, still under the RC zone, apartments are allowed. In fact, every residential use that's allowed in the RM zone is allowed in the RC zone as well. In fact, actually, in the purposes of the RC zone, it says, the code says, residential multifamily zoning is also permitted, which meets demands for housing in areas of concentrated recreational services, including seasonal and retirement homes. So actually the purpose of the RC zone recognizes that it can have commercial, or it can have multifamily as well. I want to turn to the staff report. Goal 1. Goal 1 is about process and a policy framework. It sets up a process for how changes are supposed to be processed. What you have before you tonight is what they're calling a major comprehensive plan and zoning map amendment. So what makes it a major change is the change from residential to commercial. Goal 1 sets out a process, a procedure for handling such changes, and it actually contemplates, obviously, that such changes are going to occur. The staff report indicates that the rezoning would introduce a new zone in the area, and it would, they seem to be saying that because of that simple fact, it's not consistent with the goal. But again, the goal sets up a procedure to address exactly that kind of change. So, in fact, it is consistent with the goal. Going through the process is what's consistent with the goal. In fact, the comp plan expressly contemplates this kind of change. So under plan review and amendment, this is a quote, "Although the comprehensive plan is designed and intended to be the controlling land use planning instrument to the year 2010, it is important to recognize and effectively deal with major changes in the community. The comprehensive plan reflects the desires of the community at the time it is adopted and must be continually reviewed and revised to keep pace with changing circumstances and community desires and standards." I think in the first paragraph of the staff report under Goal 1, there's also, it says, "Review of these amendments in accordance with the comprehensive plan and the applicable zoning ordinance provisions, including the provisions of LCMC Chapter 17.88, establishes conformance with this goal." And I think that's exactly right. Going through the process is what establishes conformance with this goal. You're going through the process right now. It is in conformance with the goal. Goals 2, 3, and 4, we have we all agree it's consistent with the goals. Goal 5, the natural hazard goal, which says the city shall control development in hazardous areas to protect life and property from natural disasters. The staff report just says the city's maps show the site as being in bluff erosion and tsunami evacuation zones. With the exception of 2 of the 8 tax lots, the site is fully developed with residential dwellings. The proposal is not consistent with Goal 5. It doesn't say why being in the erosion zone or the tsunami zone makes it inconsistent with the goal. Goal says to control development hazard areas. There's a whole chapter, Chapter 17.47, about development, about controlling in the hazard areas. It's about erosion is primarily, and it sets out a whole process, the whole contents of a geotechnical analysis that has to be done. And then if the recommendations of that geotechnical analysis can be met with, there can be development. There's nothing in the code that says if it's in an erosion zone, you can't build on it. So as long as we jump through the hoop of getting the geotechnical report, and the geotechnical report agrees that structures can safely be built, they can be built. Regarding the tsunami zone, there's really nothing in the code or the comprehensive plan that I'm aware of that talks about development in the tsunami evacuation zone. I'm not sure that the evacuation maps have been adopted actually in any sense or into the plan. In any event, as the application materials indicate, it's real easy to get to get out of the tsunami zone. If you look on the map here, see this line in the street? That's one of those blue lines that says leaving the tsunami zone. And if you have seen the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries beat the wave analysis, they said all this area, you can, after the shaking stops, you can get out of the tsunami area at a slow walk. You don't have to walk fast, you don't have to run, you don't have to sprint. You can stroll up the street and get out of the tsunami area. So there's nothing inconsistent about regarding the tsunami evacuation zone and allowing development in this area. Again, the fact that it's in the zone just means there may have to be some controls, but it's not prohibited. The housing goal, we said in the written narrative, the rezoning will have little or no effect on the availability of housing. The staff report emphasizes that this would take 2.06 acres out of the supply of RM zone land. Actually, in the housing needs assessment that was done a few years ago, there was an analysis of how much RM zone land we need for future multifamily development and how much we have. The need was 30-some acres, I think. The supply is, according to that, is 83.5 acres. One thing to keep in mind in that regard is we're not really talking about 2 acres. We're talking about 1 acre at the most. And actually, the site is already 3/4 built. So really, there's only 2 lots that would be in the inventory of available RM zone land. Together, up on top of the bluff, they total 1/4 acre. So to the extent they might come out of the inventory, we're talking about 1/4 acre of actually where we have a almost 50-acre surplus in any event. And of course, you can still build apartments on this property. There's nothing that prohibits it. Under either the RM or the RC zone, apartments are allowed there. The only difference, and it's a procedural difference, is that in the RC zone, it would be a conditional use. And I think from a city standpoint, that's a good thing, not a bad thing, because it gives the city more control over what gets built, the design, and so on. Also, because it would be in the anything else would be built in this zone. And speaking of design, would be anything commercial would be subject to the city's commercial design standards. So the rezoning actually would end up giving the city a lot of control over any kind of or most kinds of development that would happen there. Goal 7, the economy, we agree that is consistent. Goal 8, the aesthetic, the only thing in there again is that little area of significant aesthetic resource in the right-of-way of Southwest 3rd. The code says development in areas of significant aesthetic resources must not reduce the scenic character of the area or substantially alter the natural vegetative cover. The comprehensive plan actually sets out a detailed report that has to be done on any development within 100 feet of a significant aesthetic area. That report has to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. So again, you'll have that control so that something happens really basically in those first 2 lots to the north. You have control over the design and to make sure it doesn't adversely affect the aesthetic character. Let's see. That's in a nutshell. That's what I want to say about aesthetics. Really, there's I think it's pretty clear that the standards met. In fact, just the act of rezoning does not change aesthetics at all. So, transportation. The staff report says there's no sidewalks on the west side there, and there's no bicycle lanes, and apparently, therefore, accordingly, doesn't meet the transportation goal. Wow, that went by fast. Any new development's going to have put in sidewalks, and actually in the TSP, the Transportation System Plan, the city has provisions for not only sidewalks all the way from 101 up to 9th, or down to 9th, I guess you'd say, but also a bike shared roadway marking for bicycles. The city recognizes those things that need to be done and wants to take them on. On energy, I'll just say that any new construction has to comply with the building code standards, which have a lot of energy conservation things. So the energy conservation would be covered. I have basically the exact same things to say about the statewide planning goals. Land use planning is procedural.
Okay, you can just stipulate you're saying the same thing.
I just want to make sure things get covered. On the housing, I think, just one thing I'll mention is that the staff report says that change in zoning would allow the same number of units currently allowed, but would require a conditional use permit. I think that's a good thing. It also says that zoning to the RC zone allows for unlimited use of the existing dwellings as VRDs, thus removing from the housing stock. There's 6 houses there now. 3 of them are VRDs. If it went to the RC zone, then conceivably there could be 8 houses that are VRDs there. Actually, that's not bad. That's if you look, commercial zoning here. Hard pressed to think of a place where there would be less impact on residential properties from VRDs than in here, because it's all pretty much surrounded by commercial. There's a street down here that helps to separate. So we have all this commercial here. What you have in this interface here is storage lockers, a couple parking lots, a couple of vacant, semi-abandoned buildings, dumpsters from Pier 101. So it's not a highly desirable permanent residence area. Transient visitors are going to be focusing on the ocean, and so it's much more desirable in that sense. So it's actually a great place for VRDs. One other thing I'll say.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up here, Richard. You're over your time.
I appreciate it. I just want to say there's this 40-foot buffer here on 5th, but there's a topographic change that goes on here too. If you're at down at 5th, right down here, the elevation is about 68 feet. You go up a block. Actually, I got the information from your GIS people at 7th Street. The elevation is 120 feet, and you get up to 8th, it's 142 feet. So that's about 80 feet, almost 80 feet of difference of elevation. So you have a topographic change that tends to isolate this area that we're talking about. So again, the idea of there be somehow intrusion and eventually everything's going to go commercial is not. That's not the case. There's geographic constraints on that as well. It's a great site, and urge you to recommend approval of the rezoning.
Okay, questions for the applicant?
I have one. Under traffic, you estimated potential increase of 91 trips a day, and you mentioned you compared it to the traffic on Highway 101, and I was wondering if there was any consideration for the traffic on Ebb, particularly where you exit out onto 101 and there is no light, because I tend to drive through there pretty often, and it's taking a left turn out of there. I could imagine traffic getting kind of backed up with an extra 91 trips a day and the traffic that goes along the highway. So I was wondering if you took any consideration of the traffic on Ebb or just Highway 101.
Because the increase in traffic is so minor. I mean, 91 trips a day is virtually nothing.
For Highway 101.
Well, actually, for almost any street. I mean, this street is is it a minor collector? I can't remember, but anyway, it's the traffic level is low. 91 trips. You know, if during 12 hours, what is that? That's like one every couple of minutes or every few minutes. It's not that much of an impact. ODOT hasn't commented or said that there needs to be any changes to the transportation facilities like that would be warranted. Certainly, it can be harrowing now to come out. You know, often when I drive, I just go up to 12th because there's a light there and you can do it.
All the way through town.
Yeah. So.
Other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I have one. So on the applicant's narrative, just Eugene and Karen Scrutton are listed.
Yeah. This is Karen.
Why is just why are you just listed, not the other people?
Well, I think all the folks, all the way down to the orange line there, they're all,
There was some
everybody's game.
differentiation, but-
And mine is a vacation rental.
Yeah.
And man, it's the perfect spot. We've got the pier dumpster right across the street, and then that city abandoned old fire station, and then Shirley's Sip and Sand and the US Bank parking lot. So, and then you go a little further, there's Subway there. So that little area there is odd-shaped and not so good for apartments, but it's really been good for a vacation rental.
So
A little loud with the dumpster in the mornings from Pier 1, but we have a fence there, and try to make the emphasis the ocean. And people don't live there full-time, so they can kind of overlook some of that, I think. And then also solicit Pier 1 for dinner, or Subways for sandwiches, or,
So
you know.
I was just trying to clarify why the narrative only had.
Oh,
And that's just my fault. When I first started writing this, those were my clients.
Yeah, I thought there was some.
They got all the others.
Buying all the property from.
No,
others.
heck
no,
no.
no. All the others have signed on as applicants as well. I just didn't put it on there when I was first writing it.
So my second question is related, is I guess I understand why. Why do you want to do this?
well, for us, we have 10 grandkids, and we want to try to pass this on to them, and I don't know how else we'd hang on to it.
What the impetus? I'm sorry. The impetus for the Scruttons in particular is when the city modified or made changes on allowing VRDs, the transferability, and so on, and where they're allowed. The non-conforming ones and VRDs are not allowed in the RM zone, multifamily zone. So those 3 VRDs became non-conforming. Under the way the law is written now, non-conforming VRDs cannot be transferred to anyone under any circumstance, except in Rhodes End for I think 4 or 5 more years. But these could not be transferred as VRDs. If they want to hand them on to the grandkids or whatever, they can transfer the house, but the use as a VRD goes away on transfer. So the idea is to retain the value of the house as a VRD. And the same is true for the other 2 VRDs in there. And again, as I say, it's a really good spot for VRDs, and it could be the impact on other
So the answer to
residential.
the question of the why is, the reason you want to change the zoning is so that you can
Keep it.
continue this to be a
Yeah.
VRD property.
Yeah, it's
What
just a
about the
great
other
spot.
owners? So there's, do they want, they're not VRDs today, right? So they don't have anything to pass on to their grandkids, right?
Right, there's 3 that are VRDs,
are, but-
there's 3 that aren't, so they're not VRDs now, so they don't have that issue.
But if they became, if we
They
change
could
the
become
zoning,
VRDs,
would be-
and they could be
they would
passed
get the
on.
benefit of becoming VRDs at
Sure.
that point, right?
Yeah.
So the whole motive is to create this block of VRDs.
No, not to create a block of VRDs, but to have these particular existing VRDs be able to be passed on, basically, is really the, yeah.
And the others may become
If-
VRDs and therefore.
If they
passed on.
choose to, that's fine, or, you know, and again, all the, any residential use that's allowed in the RM zone is allowed in the RC zone, plus full-time VRDs.
Just my question.
You have a
Commissioner,
question, Miles?
may I
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
point
ahead,
out,
Anne Marie.
VRDs are allowed in the multiple family residential zone as an accessory use.
Yeah, 30 nights per year.
30 nights
yeah.
per year. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Miles?
I was wondering if you combined all of the 8 separate lots and tore the property clean, could you build more than by multi-story, could you build a 16 units there, or something greater than the 8 lots?
Are you talking about apartments?
Yeah, how many units could you get?
If you tore everything down, again, there's $2.8 million just for the land, not counting the houses, and so I didn't calculate the total value of the 6 houses, but it's substantial also. Theoretically, you could get 31 apartment units on there, but physically it's really not possible, again, because as I mentioned, you're losing 20 feet. These are narrow to begin with, using 20 feet off the front, 20 feet off the back. You've got the amount of land that's required for parking, for landscaping, for recreation area. It really starts constraining things. So you have that
That's a
that issue. I don't think
hypothetical
you
that's
get
not
to-
necessarily what you're thinking of doing.
Sorry?
That's a hypothetical that's not what you're thinking about doing.
Right, yeah, no one's
No.
proposing anything, any
Right.
development at all at this point. No one's proposing to have more VRDs come in.
Right.
It's just to change the zone. So,
But you could eventually in 2050 decide to
If the bluff's still
build
there.
somewhere close to 31 units.
again, I haven't done the calculus, but I think it would be hard to get very many units on it. We looked at probably 20 would be a reasonable number to expect, assuming if you scrape the site. But that's not. No one's proposing that. That's not. There's no plan
Yeah.
like that. And maybe after the tsunami or something.
But by making this commercial somewhere down the road, somebody could propose to take half of it and build a restaurant?
Yeah.
Take
Could
another
ha-
half of it
yeah,
and
you
build
could you could have a restaurant, you could have gift shops and so on.
That
So,
entire list that
Right, that's
Anne
it.
Marie
Right.
gave was fair game. So I just have a couple of procedural things, Richard. In the packet, in the supplemental information that was provided, the narrative, basically, where you went through and talked about each of the goals, the planning goals, both the city and the state, you, in several instances, reference annexation. So I'm assuming that that's a cut and paste error.
Boy, if I did say annexation, that's...
Well,
that's
our packet...
Thank you for embarrassing me.
Well, I just wanted to
Yes.
make it clear with your response that you didn't mean to put that in there, because otherwise I would look at this
Right.
application as being inaccurate. So
Okay, yeah.
you referenced it under, well, if you really want to know, I can tell you. If you look under the comprehensive planning goals, planning goal 1, the third paragraph starts, regarding the process for this application does not specify criteria specific for making it on annexation.
Yeah, that's a mistake.
It happens a couple places, so I just want you to confirm that you didn't mean to say that.
I did not mean to say that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
so I just want to agree with you. So that's what was throwing me off a
Okay.
little bit, too. in
Okay.
terms
I
of,
apologize
okay, then
for
what
that.
is your overall multi for this?
Right.
The two
I
of them
apologize,
connected start
so-
to throw it all off.
And then I would just,
Disregard
two other points. The land use planning goal 1 is not just process. There's an and there for policy framework. And for us, those planning goals, and that, when it
Right.
refers to our comprehensive plan, that's what guides us
And that is...
for making our
That
decisions.
is the policy goals. All the other, all the other goals have policies in them.
Right.
That is the
This
policy
is the framework. And the framework is what?
I don't think it's all folded back into goal 1, though.
No, I'm not saying that either.
Yeah,
I'm
but
just
it's
saying
procedure
it's
and-
not just a process description in that goal. It's also the
It's also-
framework
Yes, yeah.
for our comp plan.
Yes.
So, did I have any other questions for you? Wait a minute, let me look. I don't think I have any other questions for
Yeah.
you.
I would just ask if anybody has questions or concerns to bring them up now rather than during deliberations, because we can respond to them now. We can't respond to them when you're deliberating.
Right,
so.
but you've already eaten through your rebuttal time, too.
No, I'm not trying to rebut. I'm trying to see if they have questions.
Does anybody else have questions on this? Okay. I think you're free.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do we have anyone signed up for testimony in support? Nope. Okay. Anybody signed up to testify at all? No. Okay. And I don't see any public agencies represented. So there's nothing to rebut. Does somebody want to testify? Does anybody want to speak? Karen, you have anything else you want to say?
No, these are down the road.
Okay, I figured the cluster there. All right. All right. This is your last chance. Okay. ORS Section 197.763, paragraph 6A states that upon request, the Commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant an opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. Do you want to hold it open? You do want to hold it open. Okay. Not less than 7 days, so we won't be making a decision tonight. So that was you asking it. So any person who testified may submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence to the City of Lincoln City, City Hall Planning and Community Development Department by, and if it's no less than 7 days. How much time do you want, Richard? Okay, let's see. So our next, let's see, a week would be February 25th, and that would then put it on our March 3rd Planning Commission meeting, okay? So the record will be open till February 25th. Okay, and you agreed to leave it open. Does the applicant waive the opportunity to submit final written argument after the close of the record? Okay. Okay. And now, prior to and during our deliberations, okay. So we're going to leave the record open, but we can deliberate. We can't deliberate until next time.
Until March 3rd, correct.
Okay.
So leave the record open until
So-
February 25th at 5 p.m.
So I need a motion for that. I need a motion to leave the record open till February 25th.
So moved.
And okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. So we will come back and talk about this at our next meeting. Thank you all for coming. All right, that's that one. Okay, it is now 6:59. The public hearing for file Annex 2020-01 and CPA and ZC 2020-02 is now open. This public hearing concerns a request to annex approximately 11.15 acres and to amend the comprehensive plan and zoning map for a site on the east side of Northwest Logan Road, approximately 370 feet south of the east-west stretch of Northeast Port Lane. This is Assessor's Map 06-11-35-CC, and that is tax lots 2400 and 2900. The requested amendment is to apply the comprehensive plan designation of single-family residential district, or R15, and change from the existing Lincoln County residential R1A zone to Lincoln City's single-family residential zone R15. The applicants and the property owners are Woods One LLC. Okay, there you are. All right. The Commission needs to take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. I'm going to ask any member of the Commission if they want to declare an ex parte contact, and I'll start that ball rolling. This topic was brought up at a Roads End Improvement Association meeting last Saturday. Richard did just a brief introduction to the Roads End folks, and I was attending that meeting. He mentioned that the annexation and zoning could result in up to 80 lots on the property. And he mentioned to the Roads End Improvement Association folks that if they wanted to come and attend this meeting, that it was happening. There was no other discussion that I recall at that meeting.
I'll make the same declaration. I was at the same meeting, heard the same information.
Okay. So I have not prejudged this application, and I'm not prejudiced or biased by any potential conflict, prior contacts, or involvements. I do live in Roads End. I should let you know that. And you do too. That's why we're at the Roads End Improvement Association meeting.
Drive by the property
Okay, so.
times a day.
Okay, so I've not prejudged it, and I'll make this decision based solely on the application of the relevant criteria and standards to the facts and evidence that are in record at this proceeding. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the qualifications of a commissioner to participate in this matter? Okay. Okay, we're back to the statement. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the City Code and ORS 197.7635. Staff, could you let us know what the applicable substantive criteria for the decision is?
Why, yes, I do. The amendment must be in conformance with Oregon revised statutes, the Oregon statewide planning goals, the Lincoln City Comprehensive Plan, and the applicable provisions of Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 17.
Okay, thank you. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those applicable substantive criteria that Anne Marie just listed, or such other criteria in the plan or land use regulations which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes any appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes any action for damages in civil court. Prior to the end of this hearing, any person who participated may request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence. Before the staff presents a report, I need to again summarize the public hearing procedures which have been adopted by the Planning Commission and the City Council. A summary of these procedures is on the table by the entrance to the chambers. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: the preliminary matters and required statements, the staff report, our questions of staff, followed by the applicant's presentation, and then Comments in favor of the application, those that are neutral to the application, and anyone who is opposed to it. Testimony from public agencies, the rebuttal by the applicant, requests of continuance or to leave the record open, close of the hearing, close of the record, request to submit written arguments, deliberations, and finally decision. The city has established some time limits. The applicant will have 15 minutes and may reserve up to 5 minutes of that time for rebuttal. After the applicant testifies, any person may speak for up to 3 minutes. If we have questions, your time will not be, answering the questions won't be counted against your time limit. And if you wish to speak, please print your name and your mailing address clearly on the sign-up sheet at the table at the entrance. When you come up, speak directly into the microphone and begin by stating your name only. And if you have written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy of it to James. We're ready for the staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Anne Marie Skinner with the Planning and Community Development Department, and this is case file Annex 2020-01 and CPA ZC 2020-02. As Madam Chair has stated, the applicant is Woods 1 LLC, also the property owner. The site does not have an address as it is undeveloped. It consists of 2 tax lots, and I'll refer you to the screen at the front of the room. This is one of the tax lots, and this is the larger tax lot. And according to the Lincoln County Assessor's Office property report, the 2 tax lots total 11.15 acres. The request is to annex both of these tax lots into city limits with the R15 single-family residential zone. The surrounding uses are as follows. The area to the north and the west, as you can see on the screen, is zoned Rhodes End. That's R1 RE. So that's the single-family residential zone for Rhodes End. The area to the west, or excuse me, the east, is zoned R1 7.5. And the area immediately adjacent to the south is zoned recreation commercial. And this is a hotel right here to the south. This area is undeveloped. It's tribal land owned by the tribe. The area to the west and the north, those are all residences. This large circle here, orange circle, is a city-owned water tank. And the area to the east, those are all residences as well.
And there's that little cutout on the southwest corner. That's a separate lot?
That is a separate tax lot. Yep, separate owner, zoned R1RE.
Just a little triangle is it?
Mhm.
And the
This
little triangle in the northwest
This-
corner is also
Yes,
a
it
separate
is.
lot?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And as you can see, the site is surrounded by city limits, so it sits kind of as an island. It is in the urban growth boundary, which is the area designated for future city growth and future annexations.
Was this area at one time, I think maybe 3 years ago, brought in as a subdivision and it was denied for some reason?
Yes, and that is what I'm getting to next in the staff report, so thank you, Commissioner Schlesinger. There were 2 previous efforts, actually. The site has been, the subject of 2 previous annexation attempts. Oh, and let me say one thing, is that I have to thank James White, our clerk and assistant planner, because he did the bulk of the work on this staff report, pulling together all the information from the previous efforts. So I want to give credit where credit is due. I just kind of came in and said, oh, that needs to be an and instead of a but. So the previous efforts, there was one in 2005 by Kirk Wardius, and he requested that the site be annexed into the city and retain the Lincoln County residential zoning, which is a single-family residential designation with a 6,000 square foot minimum lot size. That effort in 2005 did not include a development plan. It was simply an annexation application, and City Council denied that annexation request, and there were a number of reasons for that, including the inability of the city to identify the impacts and service demands of development on the property because the application materials did not contain a development plan, concerns about the impact of new traffic in an already congested section of road, uncertainty about the availability of water and the ability to provide for the subject property and for the road's end area as a whole, and that was in 2005. In 2014, there was a second attempt to annex the site. That attempt...
I'm sorry, so that first attempt was prior to Rhodes End being annexed?
Correct.
Okay.
The second attempt then included not only the annexation application, but it also included a comprehensive plan amendment and zone change, and a preliminary master plan PUD subdivision tentative plan. That application, because it had a development plan, proposed 71 dwelling units in a mix of apartments, townhouses, and single-family homes. And I should say that that attempt also included a development agreement. On that particular attempt, City Council also denied in a final order dated June 8th, 2015, finding that there is currently no demonstrated public need or necessity for annexation of additional residential lands, and that the developer's proposal to include a workforce housing component in the development agreement was appropriately directed to filling a specific housing need. However, ultimately, the level of commitment the developer was willing to make toward this need in the development agreement in terms of percentage was inadequate. The current application requests annexation with the comprehensive plan map amendment and zoning change, but it does not have a development agreement and it does not have a proposed development plan. The application materials were received by city staff and deemed complete on January 14th. The appropriate notifications were done to property owners within 250 feet. The annexation request, along with the comprehensive plan and zone change requests, was posted throughout the city in 5 different places. The city code does not have a process for annexation, so the city relies on Oregon revised statutes, which is why that was one of the applicable substantive criteria. And part of those requirements include the postings. The analysis for the annexation and comprehensive plan map amendment and zone change is given in the staff report, listing each of the land use planning, or each of the goals from the comprehensive plan, as well as the statewide planning goals, and identifying whether staff felt they were consistent or not consistent. And I will not go through all of those unless you have a specific question on one of those.
Commissioners, any specific questions on the planning goals? No? That's it? That was quick. Okay. So, any questions for staff? Um, no. You can make a...
He's signed up to speak.
You can make a, when I get there. You can do that when you come up to speak. If you would wait, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Richard's already tested my ability to flex time-wise. So, I believe you said in going through the information that the annexation is inconsistent with the Goal 6 housing. Can you elaborate on that?
Did I say that? I didn't think I did.
I put it in my notes, but I didn't highlight.
I have, it says it's consistent.
Oh,
The
okay.
request is consistent
Gotta
with
note
Goal
that it
6.
says it's not satisfied, because we have a surplus of single-family zone undeveloped and no promises on workforce housing.
Okay, that's probably what I was trying to figure out, was
It-
that
I have
it-
notes that
the
In-
narrative talks about it being inconsistent, but speak into your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. It says both in under there's the second to last paragraph. It closes with the proposed annexation is not consistent with Goal 6, and then in the last two sentences it says the
it's
types
consistent.
yeah, it says it is consistent.
Yeah, that was,
That is an error that I
Pick
will
one.
need to fix. It is consistent.
Okay,
It is consistent with Goal 6, the housing goal.
thank you. Okay, any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you, Anne Marie. Okay, applicant's presentation. Hi.
Evening.
Good evening.
Richard Townsend, Townsend Planning and Design LLC, here on as a consultant on behalf of Woodswin LLC. And with me, I'll let the Woods identify themselves.
My lovely wife Karen Woods.
John-
Yeah, speak
Okay,
into the-
speak right
directly
into the
into the microphone.
microphone so we can pick it up.
My lovely wife Karen Woods, and myself Stephen Woods.
She is lovely.
I'll be brief.
All right.
Because we agree that with staff that all the goals that the application is consistent with the goals, both in the comprehensive plan and the statewide planning goals. So one thing I do want to do is to if you all would like, is to address what's different now from 2005 and 2014, when the earlier owners, I guess two different earlier owners, were denied denied the annexation. And this time I do mean annexation, by the way.
Good. Thought you would.
In the 2005 annexation application, there were three issues that the city council apparently raised. The first was the inability to identify the impacts and service demands of development on the property because the application materials, did not contain a development plan. That was in 2005. The rules have changed now because of the size of the property. It would have to go through a planned unit development process, which is at least 2 more hearings before the Planning Commission. And if it's phased, there would even be more hearings. In the PUD process, there's a lot more information that's required, a lot more detail. Before, it would have just required a subdivision application and be approved, and that would be done. In fact, that was with the 2005 application. The 2014 application did include a development plan, and the Planning Commission at that time recommended approval of the development. So the information does come in in the development plan. Now, you may wonder why this time around there is no proposal, no plan for the PUD, and no development agreement. And the reason is this approach, just coming in for the rezoning or the annexation and the rezoning, that was what the former planning director and the city manager said to do. That's the way they wanted us to approach it. And I say the former planning director is the one between me and Anne Marie. So,
Okay.
so that's what we did. What would happen, obviously, is, and one of the good reasons for that is the planned unit development plan is a very, very expensive thing to prepare. There's a lot of detail, a lot of engineering goes into it, a lot of design work, and it's expensive, and you don't want to go through that hoop if you don't want to spend that money if you don't have to. If it's not going to be approved, you're not going to be annexed, there's no reason to spend that money. So we just wanted to,
Wasn't that done for the second?
Pardon me?
Wasn't that done for the second
Yeah, it was,
go-around?
but they don't own that plan. They do
But-
anticipate doing something at least similar to it, to that earlier plan. I mean, a lot of that engineering has been done, but I don't know if they have to buy it from the former owner or the engineering company that did it, for example, or from the Lawrence Kamar, who was the planner who
Yeah.
worked on it, the architect.
So, okay, so I just wanted to get this straight in my head because I wasn't here. The first time it was denied because there wasn't a plan.
That was one of the
That was
reasons.
one of the reasons it was denied. There wasn't a plan. The second time, there was a plan, but it was still denied. So was the
different reasons.
denial of the second time based more on lack of need for additional housing?
Yeah, at that time,
Lots?
it was said that there was supposedly a glut of undeveloped land in the city. And I explained it in the narrative, but they said the land values in Hunter's Highland subdivision, which is now part of Olivia Beach, had dropped to 58.6% of their, in 2013, they had dropped by 58.6% from 2010. Bayview subdivision down near the high school down near Taft had gone into default. There was a pending 234 unit PUD that would add to the glut, and did we need more? And there were 790 vacant residentially zoned parcels in the city. A lot has changed since then. In 2019, when I checked, the lot values in Hunter's Highlands, which they said had gone down 58.6%, were now 288% of what they were in 2012. So they had almost tripled in value from 2012. Bayview is thriving. It's almost, this was again back in November. It was 73 units, of which only 24 were still for sale, and one of which was a resale for someone who bought it and then was selling it. So it was more than 2/3 sold out. The 234 unit Lincoln Palisades PUD application was withdrawn, and in fact, what ended up is 23 lots were proposed. Now there's more areas that probably will be built someday in that area, and that's in these sort of peninsulas that come here. They likely will be proposed in future phases for subdivision, but right now they're not on the market at all for anything like that. The phase 4 of the Lincoln Palisades is up north of that area. So the other thing that they were concerned about in 2014 or into 2015 was about workforce housing. And the city council order said, yeah, it was great. They said they're going to do some workforce housing, but they didn't say that they were going to do enough. The problem is, the city council never said what enough is. That is the kind of thing that can be worked out in the development agreement. The 2014 proposal had a development agreement that had some workforce housing in it, and again, that's just a subject of negotiation now. And the Woods are willing to negotiate a development agreement and are interested in the idea of having workforce housing. The 2014 proposal had 8 fourplex units, the big houses that the city council recently authorized in residential areas. Because there was a PUD, they also put them in, the applicants put it in here. There are 8 of them, which included, I don't remember the number now, but it included workforce housing, and something similar is likely it would come along. But again, that's a subject to negotiation that needs to be worked out. So really, the conditions that led to the 2005 denial and the 2014-2015 denial no longer exist. Things are very different now, and I should look at this proposal again as which as staff, and we agree everything that the application is consistent with what it has to be consistent with, the comprehensive plan goals and policies and the statewide planning goals.
So, just a question. The 2017 Housing Needs Assessment concluded there was substantial surplus of residentially zoned land. In fact, I think they suggested that there was enough through 2036. And I don't believe that that housing assessment included the village's property.
It included everything in inside the urban growth boundary, including the village's property, the Holly Farm, everything on the east side of the lake, included this property. And I just should clarify, the fact that there was a surplus just means we have more land inside the urban growth boundary than we predict we will need for residential development over the next 20 years. That property in the Holly Farm, east side of the lake, even the northern part of the village is going to take a small fortune to get like some water and sewer into them. So what you want to do is develop the areas that are better served. This site, it's got the huge water tank right next to it. It's got water and sewer mains on the north side, on the west side in Logan Road. So the cost of extending services there is really minor. And also, as mentioned, this is close to employment areas, close to food shopping, close to recreation, close to transportation, close to public services. So it's really an ideal spot for development. And because of the topography, it really is going to be a substantial amount of the property will be left undeveloped because there's this sort of stream bed down through here. It's in a steep valley, so you can see development. It'll happen along the fringes and on a...
How will you access that east side of it across that swale?
Sorry?
How would you access the development on the east side of the swale?
You're going around this way.
A bridge?
I don't think that would be necessary. I'm not an engineer, but I don't think that would be necessary. You know, when the plan was developed for the 2014 proposal, there was no need for it, and no need shown, and Public Works was happy with the design, and there was a detailed design. Actually, we happen to have the 2014 design with us.
I'm curious.
And as I recall, yeah, it just goes up around this way. So, you know, what's shown on the GIS here is an approximation, and it would requires or ground truthing.
Well, sure.
If you look, it's not on this map, but if you look at where it shows the wetland and where it shows that stream, they're in two different places.
Well, they move.
Well, one thing is that the wetland stuff was, again, just an approximation, but basically done largely from aerial photography. And so things need ground truthing.
Sure.
The engineers who did this
Delineation.
were on the ground.
Yeah.
And so.
But this is not what you're proposing.
This is not being proposed. I just want to show you that it can be done.
Okay.
The engineering has been shown that it can be done.
Okay. Okay. Other questions?
I have a question.
Marcy?
So I noticed you're requesting it be rezoned to R15, which is a new zone to the area. And even though it's a new zone to the area, staff said that it is consistent. But I was just kind of curious, why not one of the adjacent zones, RE or R175?
Well, a couple of reasons. One is because it is such a good location in that, you know, it's close to all these things, it's a good idea to maximize the use of the land to get basically as many units, a reasonable number of units on there. Another reason is the idea of there would be a significant number of affordable housing units on there. In any kind of development, without, you know, going through all the tax credit thing that's, you know, people who are in the business of doing affordable housing do, it's really hard to make any money. And the more units you can have that are market rate units, they end up subsidizing the affordable units. So it makes it more reasonable for the property owner to include those if they can get more housing units to.
So it's about lot size.
Pardon me?
So you're saying it's because of the lot size?
It's not
the minimum
lot size, just
that's
all
allowed in
the
each zone?
infrastructure that has to be put in. It's hard to make a unit of reasonable size affordable and to make any money. And if, you know,
Well, but again, you're not requesting a multifamily either, and I would think multifamily would be more affordable if you're really wanting to develop, and you can build single-family homes in a multifamily zone. My concern was that the R15 zone is the only one that allows for unlimited VRD uses in the event that a space comes open and they get permitted. And in Rhodes End, that won't be allowed, and the R175 only allows for accessory use. So I was curious, since that's the only real difference I could find, if that was part of the reasoning for asking for
no,
R15.
this isn't about VRDs at all. In fact, as a practical matter, I doubt you would see VRDs, at least not for a long time. Right now, in the R15 zone, the cap is 10% of the number of R15 lots, which I think is 940 lots. 10% is 94.
And if we add 80 lots, that
There's
adds
94.
a lot of VRDs. That
So if you can have 94 VRDs right now, and they're at 94 as I understand it, and there's a waiting list. And last time I asked Weston about it, there are 18 people on the waiting list. Let's say the maximum number of dwelling units I think could go on this property, 79 or 80, depending on how you calculate it. That would mean 8 new VRDs would be allowed in the R15 zone. It's not going to happen here, though, because those 18 in the waiting list are ahead of this, and anybody that gets added to the waiting list before something like this gets developed is going to be ahead.
Right.
So
I understand that, but at the same time, after 2024, no one in Rhodes End is going to be able to renew their non-conforming VRD, and there are lots of people in the situation that they have been rezoned, like what we were just talking about. In the event that a transfer of a property, it wouldn't be allowed. So if we're looking at creating a new zone that doesn't exist with the adjacent ones, that just kind of caught my attention. So.
Let me say, with the R15, I believe you can get about 80 units. This earlier proposal was 71. With Rhodes End, you can get 67. The R175 is 53. And you want the more units to help subsidize affordable workforce housing. If you don't get those extra units, then the workforce housing becomes a lot less justifiable from an economic standpoint.
I would think if there's if the intent is really to create workforce housing, which we're just taking it a word because there is no plan with what we're looking at.
I'm sorry, I can't,
That would be, multifamily would be the way to allow the easiest development without having to have conditional use permits and still allowing residential. So I don't know, the R15 in the middle of nowhere there just kind
well,
of
and there's
didn't seem to fit in with the workforce housing and all that.
well, there's RC immediately to the south there, so it's that's certainly a more intensive use than.
Right.
So I think it does fit. So.
Other questions for the applicant?
I have some, go ahead.
Oh,
Give you a chance to speak.
yeah. Do we know what the impact of the development of this site will be?
Well, there's no development plan at this point.
But based off of the previous work that's been done, do we have an impact, like assessment? Like, I know if you put in more houses, there's going to be more traffic.
Right,
There's gonna be
there was a traffic study. The Public Works Department has determined that they've got the water capacity, they've got the sewer capacity. None of the private utilities, gas, electric, phone, cable, any of them have expressed any concern. Like things like police, the impact would be marginal, and library, parks, again, all marginal. And there, again, because of the topography, there's going to be substantial space left undeveloped, so there would be recreational opportunities on the property itself. I want to emphasize that you're not here about a particular development, and that's not what's being considered. It's really the zone change. Right now, the zone is R1, county R1A, 6,000 square foot minimum lot size. Right now, if the city would be willing to grant water, and they've done it before outside the city limits, it could be developed right now with 6,000 square foot minimum lot size. We get those, get 67 units on there right now. The increase to the 80 or whatever the number would be is pretty marginal. There was a traffic study that said, I think it was 11 trips in the peak hour. And I want to emphasize what a trip is. When you leave, that's a trip. When you come back, that's a trip. When the UPS comes and leaves, that's 2 trips. When the garbage truck comes and leaves, that's 2 trips. When you think of a unit, the rule of thumb is a dwelling unit generates 10 trips a day. But fundamentally, that's 5 comings and goings each, so it's pretty minor. And as I said, the traffic study said it was 11 trips in the
Well,
peak hour,
but the traffic study was looking at the difference between developing under the county zoning and under the city zoning.
Exactly.
That's not the aggregate number of traffic trips that
Right.
developing this property would
right.
entail.
But it already is zoned with the county zone. That's
Sure.
the point of that.
Sure, but it's not developed, so...
Let's say there's 80 units, rule of thumb 10, that's 800 trips a day.
Right, on Logan Road.
Yeah, which has...
That's the only access point, right?
Well, I think the vast majority of traffic would go on Logan Road. It's possible there would be some traffic up onto Port, when there would be traffic down Logan Road to the down to the beach as well, or up 44th towards the casino in that area. Logan Road, when you get down by Safeway and down by the traffic light, yeah, there is some congestion there. But Logan Road itself in this area where this is up in here is not congested. It's not it's a lightly traveled road. I mean, have you been in a traffic jam on there?
Everybody that lives in Rhodes End travels down that road, and it has actually, that intersection with Port has been the topic of numerous
Yeah.
discussions because it's dangerous.
It is
I mean,
dangerous.
it's
There's not much of an not many accidents here, but I mean, visibility is poor. There's no question of that. And actually, in the city's transportation system plan, improving that intersection is one of the items that's identified as something that needs to be done. With whatever development happens at this site, will contribute to improving that. It would have to contribute to improving the overall traffic situation. So,
Kim, did you have something?
Just a couple of things.
Into the mic,
and
into
were
the
you-
mic.
were you through? Go ahead.
I just kind of had a bit of a follow-up question. What's preventing additional development now through the county? Why seek rezoning through the city instead of rezoning through the county?
The number one thing is water.
Okay.
In the past, when developers, like the developer for, I think it's Bellhaven down in Roseanne, they got, I forget how many lots, 50-some lots. They ended up paying some very substantial money to the city for each hookup, like around $10,000, I think, for each hookup that went into the city's affordable housing fund. The main thing is just guaranteeing being able to get water. That's why people want it in.
So there's 2 lots now, so there's basically 2 hookups.
2 hookups
Right
would be
now.
allowed right now, yeah, without getting approval from the city council
Right.
for more.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Okay. Kim?
So I guess I just understand process. That what
Into
we're
the
trying to
mic.
do- What we're trying to do here is just approve annexation, right? And then
Annexation and
zoning,
rezoning.
and
zoning,
rezoning.
correct. Thank you. And then, at some point in time down the road, if there's development, that will all have to be approved at that point in time, right?
Right.
And what type and the design and
Right.
everything, correct?
Right.
Correct,
So
according
we're
to
not
the...
really getting into what a development might look like yet.
Correct.
Right.
Right?
Correct.
Okay, so then the other part that goes along with that here is I notice a number of times through, I think it's the staff report, it says that there's various things that aren't making anything binding, that at least in the proposal. For example, offering the city an easement behind the water tower, is that
Right, yeah.
right? But it's not binding. But if we approve the annexation and the rezoning, then the Woods could or could not grant that easement, right?
Right. They don't have to grant an easement now, or even if there was an annexation. They have, I mean, I'll say they're, you know, the Woods are sitting right next to me, are willing to grant an easement. And I imagine that would come in the course of a development agreement, which they're willing to negotiate with the city. And then you've got the whole, which has to be approved by the city council. Then you've got the whole PUD process, which again is a hearing for the preliminary master plan, another hearing for the final master plan, and if it's phased, and this likely would be phased, 3 or 4 phases, each phase gets another hearing at the planning commission. So,
Okay, so all the items that are noticed as non-binding in here simply become part of the negotiations
yes,
when a development plan is done.
right.
Only if they submit for a request for a development agreement, which they have not. There's an application that needs to be submitted and a fee paid for a development agreement.
And if they don't apply for a development agreement, what are their options?
If they don't apply for a development agreement and city council goes ahead and approves the annexation and the rezone, there's no development agreement.
Well,
Okay, but that, I understand that part, but then what is there? I mean, they would need
There
to come
is
in
the
for...
zone,
For,
right.
they'd have the zone,
Mm-hmm.
but then they'd need to come in and do plot
The-
lines.
they have to
Right,
come
they
in
would
and-
need to come in and do the preliminary plat, and under the current code, a PUD,
Okay,
which could change. They would just have to develop as per the current code.
okay, okay. But what the development agreement allows is some additional flexibility for how they would move forward as it's negotiated with the city.
Either, well, flexibility for the developer, more for the city.
Right,
It provides
right. It's a
some-
negotiation.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I might characterize it as not saying more flexibility, but actually probably more tightness, because it says, we will do this, we will do this, we will do this. And not doing that ends up being a breach of the development agreement, which has pretty good repercussions. So I just want to add when you asked, okay, if we do the annexation, the rezone, what happens then? Yes, at that point, there is no development agreement. That's not the same thing as saying there will not
Right,
be
no,
a
yeah.
development agreement. I just want to make that really clear.
Okay.
Again, the reason it's in the status it's in right now, asking for the annexation, asking for the rezone, is because that's what city staff said to do.
I think I've heard that before. Okay. It's just somewhat, as I'm sure you can appreciate, confusing that it was approached the first time without a plan and was turned down because there wasn't a plan, and then the second time with a plan and turned down because there was a plan. And now it's back without a plan.
Yeah,
So
but I think
that's
you have to consider the situation today, because what's not before you is what happened in 2005 or 2015. It's what the situation is today in 2020.
Sure.
And
But, that's, I mean...
it is background information, but we are where we are. The laws have changed. The facts have changed in the community, and so.
The general economy has changed.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Again, I emphasize the Woods are more than willing to negotiate a development agreement, and so assuming the annexation and rezoning are approved, there will be an effort to do that.
Okay. I appreciate that. Do you have more?
Pardon me?
Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think I covered, again, I said I was going to be brief this time, and I did something with my pages, but I think basically we're there. I mean, emphasize again, it's a really good site, really close to employment, to recreation, to services, to food. There's going to be a new school built sometime out on the Holly Farm property, so it'll be close to that. It's close in. It's completely surrounded by the city. It's not like we're bringing in this distant area. It's a donut hole, and trying to bring the donut hole under city's jurisdiction where it should be. And I also want to say, in the in the buildable lands inventory, the housing needs assessment, this was counted in this. I don't know. There's a surplus. It just means that there's more land than is projected to be needed for residential development. But this piece is just golden. I mean, it's the marginal cost to the city is so low for this, because the roads, the road is right by it, the water sewer's right by it. It's prime for development.
Okay. Any other questions for Richard or the applicant? Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone who wants to testify in support of the application? Okay. Anyone that's neutral to the application? Okay. I have one person who has signed up to testify in opposition, and it's Patrick Dunn. So here's your chance.
Thank you, and I am Patrick M. Dunn. Just a footnote to the previous discussion. The 2015 denial, 3 city councilors had to recuse themselves, leaving a smaller than normal city council. And that's all documented. You can find that in city council minutes and notes and things, if that's of any interest to anybody with this project. But there was things going on.
Okay.
Dennis Regan also testified during that process, and his comments were in opposition to the adequate number of developable properties. That's probably public record too, somewhere back there. But that's not what I'm here for.
Okay.
My objective is to ensure that the proposed annexation, and in the matter of 3 minutes, I'm going to not read all those numbers and letters,
Okay.
but we know what we're talking about. Woods 1 does not cancel the reforestation requirement of the 1971 Forest Practices Act, resulting in an unknown further period of blighted property. Number 1, the Department of Forestry, all their rules say that a landowner shall complete planting and seeding within 24 months. In 2012, the property, that's number 2 on my list, in 2012 the property was clear cut. Number 3 is in 2014, and to date, no reforestation has been implemented. Number 4, the proposed annexation states on Goal 4, page 11, the quote, "The Woods property carries the Lincoln County zone of R-1-A, which is a residential zone, not a forest zone," unquote. Number 5, all those numbers that you have on your sheet of paper from the Forest Practices Act basically define forest land in quotes. Number 25. It means land which is used for the growing and harvesting of forest tree species, regardless of how the land is zoned or taxed, or how any state or local statutes, ordinances, rules, or regulation are applied, unquote. That's state law, folks. Number 6, in 2012, logs were harvested and removed, a commercial activity. I've got photos. Number 7 is my concern. Reforestation is required and overdue. The proposed annexation states, Goal 6, page 4, quote, "While no specific plan of development," which has been talked about, "has been settled on, the woods intend to," and it goes on, unquote. I am concerned this annexation will not remedy the FPA, the Forest Practices Act, violation, indefinitely leaving the property blighted. Questions?
Well, yeah, I guess I do have some questions. The property was, the trees that were on the property were removed and sold.
As far as I know. I mean, I have photos of the commercial log trucks, of the commercial logging equipment that was being used during that time, and this story was, this is a story, I don't know true or false, but 2 developers were involved in partnership. The one developer, while the other was in Portland, brought the loggers in, cleared the land, took the money and run, leaving his partner, the one that actually did the development that was mentioned earlier here for the 71 units, kind of without recourse. And I don't know the outcome of that. I don't know the true or false of it, but that's the story.
Okay. But in order for it to be a commercial forest activity, do the trees need to be grown for harvest?
That's not clear in number 25 in the definitions of the FPA. It's not real clear about that. It just says if there is activity, if there's logging, if there is the commercial activity,
Yeah.
and if logs are removed and this, that, and the other thing, 2 years, and it's got to be replanted.
Well, but people that buy a piece of property and decide to clear a portion or all of it in order to build a house on that property, they're not required to reforest that property.
That's correct, and that's another whole issue that the Forestry Service of Oregon deals with property owners by that.
So has anybody from the
Toledo office?
Yeah, have they looked at this?
Yes.
Have they submitted anything? I haven't seen anything on this property.
That is part of bureaucracy, unfortunately. In the 2012-2014 timeframe, they relocated, I believe, from Newport to Toledo. There were staff changes. There were things that just happened because of just life, you know, it happens. And the other thing that I was told, and this is perfectly normal, those guys in the forestry department are busy with commercial logging. That's where the money is, that's where the violations are, and that's where the forests need to be protected the most. So they don't have a lot of time, and they admitted it to me, the people I talked to, that this is small potatoes. It would amount to a traffic ticket if they were to pursue this 11 acres.
So-
However, it does not negate the letter of the law in the Forest Practices Act, which is the it's Oregon law.
So, I'm going to make an assumption here that your concern for that piece of property and the removal of those trees has to do with degradation of habitat?
A lot of it, yes. And I'm an owner, and my backyard bounds that property. And you know, I've got personal loss there. The tree cutting sunburned my trees, and I lost 3. The lack of wind protection, I've lost fence. But that's not what I'm asking for any, you know, that's no problem with me. But that property has sat there for more than 5 years.
It has.
Ugly. You all know what it is. They said it in their documents, their annex request. They described what it is. It's got invasive species and everything.
Yeah.
Nothing's being done.
Yeah.
And it's overdue a violation of Oregon law. And now the Forestry Department knows the address. So I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah. I don't either.
But I'm here to say that I'm concerned that if the annexation is approved, what's going to prevent that for sitting there another 5 years or indefinitely, as I stated in my testimony? That's the problem.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Well, if we don't annex it, what's to stop it from sitting there as it is indefinitely the same?
Only the Forest Service.
Okay, so
That's all I can say.
it
I don't know
seems
what they will do.
So it seems like the Forest Service is the main avenue of redress
Well,
for this violation. Is that
They
correct?
are the, I'm trying to think of the right word, the enforcement agency.
Okay.
And that's in the law too. I've researched that. And it says in their brochures that
Yeah,
that's
but-
one of their roles is the
But
enforcement
for
agency.
whatever reason, they've either prioritized this very low or
It is,
chosen
yeah.
not to enforce this particular issue.
That's true, yeah.
I have a follow-up question to that. According to your letter here, it says regardless of how the property is zoned and all of that, and the penumbra of your language there, it basically says it doesn't matter how it's being used now, but when the violation, even if that violation occurred, then that violation occurred, and that's still a violation. So it
Correct.
wouldn't matter if we annexed and rezoned. The Forestry Department, it sounds like, but from what you've put forward, would still, if they were interested in pursuing that, still pursue that.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So, Madam?
Yes,
Clerk?
yes, sir.
So I guess I'm going to continue the line that you were going on there, so thanks for leaving. So what is your, so I guess I'm trying to see what your interest in is. Do you really want to protect your property more? Are you looking, if the city were to annex this property and then a development were to be proposed, and then during the approvals process for a development, through the commission and through the council and everything like that, that there would be requirement that trees were placed along the back of the property to protect the residences back there? Is that what your motive is in terms of what you would like to see happen?
My motive is the last 5 years, looking at that property and seeing the invasive species growing and all that problem. I don't want that to continue for another month, one way or the other. You know, if they want to come in with a firm proposal to accompany the annexation and start tractors in there and digging things up and preparing the ground for foundations, it would please me to no end, because it would get rid of the blighted area. That's my real concern.
I have another question. Really, can I interrupt
no,
really
go
quickly?
ahead,
So,
thank you,
sorry. If the main concern is about that blighted property, what's to stop somebody from contacting the woods and saying, hey, can I come in and mitigate these invasive species that are on your property and replant them with native species while we're waiting for development, while we're waiting for this property to be used?
Another good idea, definitely.
Yeah, I don't have
And
a
being
follow-up to that.
There's
That
another
is-
couple of questions that came up in your discussions, if you're interested. Being a neighbor back there and having walked the land, I can point to this area. This blue line is not a creek. That's just the start of it, the source of it. It's pretty flat in there, and this whole thing, the U shape is the plan that they have from the previous developer, but it's a U shape all the way up to here and down over there. Is fairly level, easy to grade, and grade into probably houses on both sides of a street here, around the U, and down here. This part in here is pretty steep and undeveloped, and it's a great thing for a park, for paved walkways, paved stairways or something that would make it playground type thing or something. But that's pretty not buildable down there. So, you know, I've walked this whole thing, and when the trees were there, I walked back in there, and there was a huge, huge tree, and a herd of deer, about 6, 7 strong, that I interrupted.
Yeah. Well, I hear your concern, and I understand it.
Yeah, that's all I asked for, is just the
It's horrifying to
ability
see,
to present.
yeah, the stumps that
Yeah,
have been
and
there
I had to sign
forever.
up on the negative side, because
I understand.
someone needs to put their foot down, but I'm not against the development. I'm
Yeah.
not against the property owners doing something really pleasing with the property.
Yeah.
And the idea of workforce, if that was my investment, I would probably be able to develop those 80 lots into $200,000 house, lot, and everything that a bed maker or a meal server could afford. And that's what we need more of.
Well, there are lots of people in the city that would like to talk to you then. You know, what I was going to finish saying is that, you know, if this annexation goes through and the zoning goes through, as you've been listening, there will be other hearings
Oh, yeah.
on the planning and the development of it, and I expect to see you there to provide your input, particularly on the tree and the vegetation planning and such.
Thank you.
All right? Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to talk? Come on up.
I'd like to make...
Wait till you get to the microphone so everyone can hear you. You're on TV, you know.
Steve Woods.
Yes.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. First off, I've experienced what he's talking about. It is true that when you log off a forest designated type property, you do have to replant it. I believe it's 240 seedlings per acre is the required amount. And they come back about a year later and they actually look and say, how many did those survive? And I believe you have to have a 70 or 80% survival rate. And I learned this on 50 acres out in Newburgh that we logged off at one point. And we had to do it, and it wasn't a problem. We agreed to do it. If it gets rezoned, I don't really think that's practical because we really fully intend to put a development in there. And I can't replace those 80 or 100-year-old trees that existed there. But if you look at the preliminary drawings that we had, you'll see there are a number of trees shown. And if you think of any development, you're not going to leave that land the way it is now, because it is terrible looking.
Yeah.
So, you know, we fully anticipate that you'd have to go through and landscape. Unfortunately, there's a ton of stumps in there. Something this gentleman would appreciate is it does show walking paths. It does show that really steep area that he says, you know, it would be very difficult to develop, and it would. It's too steep. Having an open area in there that the people around can utilize, and several walking paths from different areas. We're going to have to push out a lot of stumps. We're planning that we would grind those stumps up. They bring in a portable stump grinder, and that would be used for a base to do some of those walking paths, that material that we'd get from it. And again, I wish I could replace some of those old trees, but you just can't do that.
Yeah.
But he is correct as far as the replanting. That is required. I know a lot of times it happens, and the state doesn't require a landowner to do that. But he's right, it's about a 2-year time period that you get. And again, you know, they haven't done that. We didn't do that. And again, I don't think it's reasonable to say, let's go in now and plant 240 trees forever.
That you then have to take out again when you decide
If
to
that made a
develop
big
it.
difference, I'd say, sure, we'll go do it. But
Sure.
2 years from now, we're going to be bulldozing those
Well,
out.
you know, in the event that this ends up in your favor here tonight, or if we push it to the next meeting, I hope that you take the concerns and the impact that that activity had on this gentleman and all of his neighbors, and consider some type of planting screening that would assist them in getting some of that back.
Sure.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything to say? Okay. ORS, Section 197.763, Paragraph 6A, states that upon request, the Commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant an opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. Does any person who participated desire to request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional testimony or evidence? You don't want to leave it open? Not this one? Okay. Okay. Because no continuance has been requested and no request has been made to hold the record open, do I have a motion to close the public hearing and the record?
I move we close the public hearing and the record.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. We don't have our city attorney here. Does, you know, he is in the building. I have that on good authority. If anybody has any questions that they might have for our city attorney, we can get him down here. Does anybody have any legal questions that need to be addressed? I'm not seeing any. Okay. This is on the table for deliberations. And you know what? I'm going to start. this time. I don't usually start, but I'm going to start this time.
Chair Crowan,
Yes,
I believe there is one piece that we skipped, and that is a waiver of the right of the applicant to supply written testimony after the
I
fact.
skipped something? Oh, I did, you're right. Richard, you should have caught that. Does the applicant waive the opportunity to submit final written argument after the close of the record as provided in ORS Section 197.763, Paragraph 6E? Yes, you waive it. Okay, there. Now we did it. Thanks, James, catching me on that. Okay. You know, when I think about these kinds of things, annexing additional land into the city, I have to look at how much land is already here to develop and how this could impact that. Because, you know, when something new is proposed, I think we have to look at real closely at what wins and what loses. And the city has a surplus of land right now. In fact, the city is doing everything it can think of to encourage development of certain parts of the city, particularly the villages area, which has, as I recall, thousands of potential lots up there. They're even working on an urban renewal district that will fund development up there, identifying that undeveloped land as blighted land. And the other thing that I'm learning through the whole public urban renewal exercise is that many of the projects that have been contemplated to be funded through that process are to address aging infrastructure. The water systems in Rhodes End are there from the 70s. They're starting to fail, according to our public works folks. And so there's going to be money needed to address that aging infrastructure and also water reliability in Rhodes End. So that's my first concern. I'm concerned about money being diverted to bring potentially 80 new hookups online when there are several hundred potential failing hookups in the near vicinity. Traffic impacts to Logan Road, I think, have been somewhat understated. And again, potentially diverting money from existing issues on Logan Road, including speed calming devices perhaps further down onto Logan, or pathways along Logan in the Rhodes End area. That's all money that would be diverted to deal with a new development in the area. So that's another concern that I have. And, you know, the only other one that I will mention is on one page of the applicant's narrative, it suggests that the development on this property would be beneficial to Rhodes End. I don't get that. You know, I think the statement is that it would provide a more pleasing entrance to the area. And I will tell you, as blighted as it is, and the stumps are somewhat horrifying, I drive that road several times a day. And more often than not, I see wildlife in that lot. I see deer in that lot. I worry about the deer in that lot because people speed on Logan, and they speed around that curve quickly. In fact, in a somewhat stunning act of civil disobedience, my husband actually put up a sign telling people to please slow down. So I disagree that, you know, if that clear cut had been appropriately addressed under the forest laws in the state, it would be far more pleasing to see that natural habitat than a wall of houses. So I just want to be clear about that. I understand that you know, we are here to decide on the merits of this based on the law and based on its consistency with our planning goals and the statewide goals. But I want to make it very clear that that kind of statement is not accurate, that it would be more pleasing. It's not beneficial. The traffic on Rhodes End would not be beneficial, or on Logan would not be beneficial to Rhodes End. Yes, I have been stuck in traffic on Rhodes End, and if you think about the potential hazards associated with all of us that are in that area, that's one road in and one road out, and adding 80 additional houses in an area where their only access would be onto Logan Road is a significant impact, and I think it needs to be addressed as a significant impact. The traffic at Logan and 101 is an issue for ODOT. They are very concerned. There's too much traffic on that corner. So now we're talking about adding an additional 80 houses, and unless and until that often talked about extension of 47th Street over from the casino to the golf course is in, there really isn't any other way to access 101 except Logan on that spot. There are no sidewalks. There are a tremendous number of vacationers that treat the entire Rhodes End area as a resort and walk down the middle of the street in the dark, in black. So any development agreement from my perspective, or any planned development that comes in, is going to have a heavy lift from my perspective in terms of approval without some really significant thought given to those issues. So that's all I have to say. I'd like to hear from the rest of the commissioners. Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
New guy starts. Like Commissioner, sorry, I haven't remembered or memorized everybody's last name yet. Commissioner Baker said, the proposed rezoning is completely, it's going to make an island of that one zone in amongst a bunch of other zones that are, we've got the Rhodes End zone to the west, and then we've got the R17 to the east, and we're essentially talking about creating a more densely, potentially more densely densely used area, proposing a higher population density in there, and that's seems to me inconsistent with our planning goals to keep in line with the aesthetic of the existing neighborhoods and the existing areas too. It does raise some concerns that, yeah, that is a zone where we have accessory use that's allowed for vacation rentals, and that seems to be a big concern for a lot of people, especially up in the Rhodes End area. I don't know that particular zone as it stands is probably to me, it doesn't seem like it's the best fit for that property.
So let me clarify something.
Yeah.
This is the proposal here. There's two decisions.
Mm-hmm.
There's a decision on annexation,
Yeah.
and then there's a decision on the zoning.
Mm-hmm.
So we can take them separately. They don't come as a packaged set.
I understand.
Okay, I
No,
just
yeah,
wanna
I
clarify
understand
that.
that. I'm just, as it is proposed, both the, with the annex and the zone change. So those are my thoughts on as it is proposed with the annex and the zone change, and those are some concerns that it present themselves to me in that.
Kim?
Yeah, I think Patty, Madam Chair, I think you made some excellent points about the impact on Rhodes End and the community. However, I think that there are a number of areas, undeveloped areas in the city that are just as ugly, for lack of a better word. And there are areas that are developed in the city that might even be more ugly in terms of code enforcement or lack thereof, in terms of how people take care of the property. And so I think I would echo your comments about having a heavy hand, and Mr. Townsend, you mentioned, negotiations when it came to the development. I would hope and expect that this commission and the city would take the upper hand in terms of taking into consideration the water rights and the streets and just the transportation efforts there on Logan Road and the sidewalks, that if you want to develop that property, it's going to cost you to develop that property in order to make it a better place than it is today and can be in the future. So I see advantages. I don't think it presents a very good entry into the community, and the RV park is also there. This might help that a little bit, but at the same point in time, it's got to be the final development plan. In my opinion, if I was the only person voting on it, needs to be something that is paramount to the advantage of the city and the residents versus the developer.
Josh?
I agree with many of the statements my fellow commissioners have made here tonight. I don't really have anything outside of that to voice, other than the fact that I'm glad that regardless of what decisions are made and what happens to the property in the future, anything to improve its current state is a step in the right direction.
Miles?
I think the property looks horrible now, and it's got to be developed so that it is a part of the community. And I'm troubled by the fact that there isn't a plan other than perhaps making it more units there so that it can have some more affordable housing. And I really don't see any reason why not do that, because it's an eyesore now, and it's been an eyesore since they logged it in 2012. So I would be in favor of progressing with the proposal, but we can have another crack at it, I would think, when yeah, and so I'd be for annexation. I think that it is appropriate to have as many lots as possible in Lincoln City so that more people can afford housing and or rental housing and workforce housing.
Marcy?
Well, I agree with you that the way that it was worded about the traffic impact, if you had 80 homes in there, that's going to massively increase the amount of traffic that's going up that part of Logan Road, and through the intersection at the light, which you already sometimes end up with people back where you're already turning left by the Shell station that are waiting to get in to turn there. So I do see an issue with that, with it sounding like the goal with the R15 to be maximizing the amount of density that could be there. Annexation makes sense because it looks like an island in the middle of nowhere there. So that does make sense to me, but you know, if there were a plan that really showed something it's adding to the community, like, you know, portioning out a big spot for a dog park or a human park or something like that that adds to that community, that could maybe even be along the road and be what you see, you know, that would kind of pull me in the other direction. But you know, with there being no guarantee that we'll ever see a development plan, if we do allow the R15 zone, they would have the option to just develop as the zoning currently allows, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So we would have no more say from here on out if they chose not to. Even so, there is that possibility, and we don't have that guarantee. So those are really just my concerns, and that the R15 seems to me to be inconsistent with the comp plan. With the other rezonings that we've looked at since I've been here, you know, it seems like a pretty hard line to, you know, throw in a zone that doesn't exist next to two other ones is not something we're supposed to do.
Yeah. I want to clarify, there would be a site plan review, correct? Or not?
Well, under the current code, because it's over 2 acres, the subdivision would have to be done as a planned unit development under the current code, provided that doesn't change.
Okay. Hypothetically, if they wanted to come in and plot out the lots, they could do that, and then they could develop individually, or would that require a PUD?
That would, under the current code, that would require a PUD
It would require a PUD
subdivision.
form. Okay.
Okay, so it would, because it's one solid. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Other thoughts? Anybody? Anything? Okay. There's my thing. Do I have a motion? Don't all speak at once.
Do you think we should maybe separate these two decisions in two different ones, or is that's what we're trying to figure out
We
now? If
can.
wanna package
We
them up,
certainly
or-
can. You can make a motion to do them individually.
I would motion, I don't know the exact wording, so we may have to do that, but I would motion to approve the annexation, but I would like a little further look into the zoning.
I would second that.
Okay, so your motion is to approve the Annex 2020-01.
Correct.
Okay, and I
To
have
recommend approval.
a recommend approval. And I have a second. Do we need a roll call? James?
Did we have a second?
Yes, Marcy.
Marcy did, okay. Okay. Marcy Baker.
Yes.
Kim Blackerby.
Yes.
Josh Brainerd.
Yes.
Patty Crowan.
Yes.
Lenny's not here. Miles Schlesinger.
Yes.
Max Smith.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you something, Josh. Since you said you'd need more information on the zoning part of it, what kind of information would you want?
Many of the things really that were voiced here, I think things have been looked at environmentally on that property several times. We're pretty well versed in the concerns there. But I agree with traffic as a resident in Lincoln City, and I don't live in the Logan Road area, but I do travel all these roads as much as any other resident. And to look at putting a higher density there on that road, which we know as residents that we already have at least some concerns about. So given the fact that we don't have the opportunity to come back and really have a finer tune a plan under that R15 zone, if we approve that tonight, we would be kind of out of options if none of those problems were really being addressed. Or at least we would have more limited options.
The main difference in the R15 and the R175 is the lot size.
Is lot size, yeah.
Setbacks
so-
are the same, maximum building coverage is the same, maximum height is the same.
Yeah,
It's the
so-
difference
and the
between the
density
5,000 and the
difference-
7,500.
For this, trying to do the math quick, it's 11 acres, so the density, so it's 5,000 versus 7,500 lot size, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a substantial difference.
Can't do that in my head.
Yeah.
It's 1.5 times.
It's closer to 50 to 60 homes instead of 80. with the
Okay, so I agree with what your intent is, that the density needs to come down. But at the same time, if we're looking for affordable and workforce housing, the density has to go up.
Correct.
Can we just not let them have cars? Sorry, that was flippant.
Community?
Was flippant. Yeah, a bike community, that's what I'd like. So I'm torn with that because this city has no workforce housing. And yet, if we go with R15, assuming that we will get workforce housing, we have nothing to base that on other than the Woods' smiling faces that they intend to do that. We don't know that they intend to do that. So, it's a leap of faith.
Is there a middle ground option of zoning?
No.
You can't zone it part one thing and part one, another thing, because it's all one lot, right?
Yeah, you can't
Yeah.
do that.
You can't like designate an open space or something
Well,
like that.
and the request is to rezone it to R15. And
Right,
so you
they
can
don't
either
have a request.
recommend approval or recommend denial.
Right.
Right.
And then we can let city council beat us up again.
Can we recommend approval with the condition that 20% or 10% of the housing units have to be deemed affordable?
Well, you don't have a development agreement. So no. No, because it's not a conditional rezone. It's just a rezone.
Could you pass it with a condition that development would require a development agreement?
That's a Richard question, but I believe no.
No, I don't
wouldn't
think
think
You
so.
don't have the
It's an up or
authority.
down.
It's
Because
it's
it's
a
an option.
recommend,
Yeah.
approval or denial. It's not a recommend approval with conditions. That's not
Because it's not a condition.
part of the authority in the code.
So can I question?
Go ahead, yep.
So can you refresh my memory in terms of if we deny, then what can they do with that property?
Well, you've recommended approval of the annexation. So if you recommend denial of the zone change, then if city council goes along with that and denies the zone change but approves the annexation without a designated zone from the city, it would come in
County.
with the county's zone of R1A. So if they developed it under the R1A in the city, then city staff would have to administer the county's zone of R1A on that property,
And that's a 6,000.
Which is the
What could go
6,000.
which should be
on?
6,000 square foot lots.
And that's kind of your happy medium right there.
It kind of is the
Yeah.
happy medium.
Well, except that
Except that it isn't,
Yeah,
but,
it's
yeah.
not a- it's not a-
enforcement
No.
nightmare
Housing
for
at
the
all.
city.
No, it doesn't. Just in terms of lot size, that's about the only happy medium there.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking throughout this whole deliberation process that we should probably, when we make the recommendation forward to city council, kind of put a statement of that we're of what we're doing here and why we're doing that.
Well, we're just making a recommendation to the city council. The city council
Yeah.
can do what they want
Yeah, I understand
with
that.
it, and we can certainly
Just a short rationale.
let
If we
them know why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, because, I mean, we've done the annexation. If we don't do the zoning, they're probably going to ask, why didn't you approve the zoning at the same time? Or why didn't you recommend the zone change? That's if we decide not to do the zone change.
Is anyone ready to decide on the zoning?
So again, I'm going to continue my thought process here, just
Okay.
thinking off the top of my head. If we were to approve the zoning, we will still, we being this commission or the council, will have input and discussion and deliberation around what actually happens there,
Yes,
right?
yes.
We're just making.
I mean, they could build 80 units versus 60 units, and I'm rounding numbers there.
Right.
What those units
Or they
look
could build
like.
20 units and put half of the property into a park. I mean, the options are broad.
Right.
But
So-
if we're looking to assist the city in the acquisition of workforce housing,
Right.
then we would tend toward the R15.
Right.
If we're concerned, if our overriding concern is too many, then we don't approve the zoning, and then it could be R1, it could be County 8, or I suppose they could come back and ask for another rezone, but I don't know.
And so what are the reasons we
Spreading.
don't want too many units? Transportation, water, sewer, the things that you mentioned, right?
Yeah,
So if we want to protect those things, then we can, as I was saying earlier, we can at least recommend in the future approval or disapproval of the development that the developer help fund some of those things as
Right.
part of it, right?
right.
In other words, you will have to, I'm making this up, so this is not, but you might have to widen the road, you may have to do this, you might have to
Right.
put in alternate roads,
Right.
blah, 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 right?
Right. And now Richard Apicello, not you, is bouncing around in my head, telling me that we aren't the ones that get to negotiate that
Oh, no, I agree.
agreement,
And I'm just,
that
yeah,
it's the
it's the
city
what
that
if down
does
the
it,
road.
so, okay.
So with that, my feeling would, we approve it, the annexation, and my feeling would be to do that, and then we let the chips fall where they fall down the road in terms of how the development looks like, and how the city controls what we want, what we would like to see happen.
Okay,
But
so,
the zone we allow is going to dictate what kind of development is allowed.
the density of the...
to a
Right,
degree.
exactly,
To
so.
a degree.
Well, yeah,
Right.
but that's really the only, that's like the starting base of what development is permitted. That's the whole reason there's a zone, right?
Right, but then there's all the other, as Mr. Townsend mentioned, negotiated items about other access points, so
Mhm.
yes, you
If-
will have to pay for and build a road out to the north or to the
If they
east
choose
or whatever.
to, yeah, oh, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and you will have to put in sidewalks, and you will
Mhm.
have to, whatever.
Commissioners, there are a certain number of requirements that have to be met regardless of the zone, just as part of development. Those include sidewalks, curb gutter, paving of the streets. Whether it's R15 or R175, they will have to perform a traffic impact study,
Right.
and they will have to abide by the results and recommendations of that traffic impact study.
And that would be a new traffic impact study,
Yes.
not relying on one that's previously been done?
It would be a new traffic impact study.
Okay.
Is there a way from this property to the east or to the north by the water tanks that could exit the property not on Logan Road or secondary entry and exit via the road?
An
I-
easement along the water tower?
For a secondary, for an emergency access?
For regular access, a secondary thing, you're going
Well,
to
that
have
would
one
be-
entrance on Logan,
Yeah,
I'm
that,
sure.
that would be something that we would have to look at with Public Works. And I believe at the pre-application conference or after the pre-application conference, I know I had a discussion with Dan Wentz and Stephanie Reed in the Public Works Department, and I'm not sure if there's enough room, I don't recall off the top of my head, if there's enough room between the edge of the water tank and the property line to allow for a full width local
there.
street.
There might be if you put, one way on one side of the tank and one way on the other side of the tank.
And that would be something that would come up through the development as part of the traffic impact study, and when Public Works looks at the infrastructure requirements for the development. And when fire looks at the number of accesses that they need in and out for emergency access as well.
Right. Okay. Okay. Do I have a motion for the zoning portion of this?
I feel like when it comes down to lot size, I pulled up the RE zone, and it is also a 5,000 square foot minimum, and then an 8,000 square foot for a duplex.
Right.
And with it being adjacent to RE in Rhodes End, I think that it's really just putting the R15 like right smack dab in the middle. So I guess all we could really do is say no to the R15 for that reason, because we can't elect anything else. But that's what I personally would feel would be the best zoning option for that spot.
To zone it R1 RE?
Rhodes End. It's next to Rhodes End. It makes sense to me. It's a 5,000 square foot. I mean, but then you're still getting all that density. But we talked about, there's going to be the other plans or the ways to deal with that. And so I'm looking at the two zones, and it seems like either R175 or RE makes sense to me, because recommending it be R15 seems that we would be going against our own comprehensive plan of putting a zone somewhere it doesn't exist. But it's also, they're both residential, so it could be, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just my thoughts.
So is there anything that would prevent the Woods from developing the development as they have indicated they want to do under, is there anything stopping them from doing that under RE rather than the R15?
The uses are the same, except
VRDs.
they didn't, except VRDs. The setbacks are a little more stringent. The maximum height is only 30 feet versus the maximum height of being 35 feet. And the other issue is that they didn't request that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't ask for that.
Exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
so we can't pick.
I mean, yeah.
No, it doesn't. It
Oh, yeah?
allows
Yeah.
duplexes,
That's right, it allows duplexes.
but
That's
not
true.
multifamily.
And multifamily is a conditional use in the zone that is requested?
Multifamily is.
It's conditional, is that right, or is it permitted?
No, it's permitted.
It's permitted,
Would
okay.
those big houses be allowed in the zone then, that have 4 units, I think, in them?
The 4 flat dwellings,
Yeah.
I'm checking right now because I don't recall off the top of my head, so.
All right.
So again, it's really up or down, right? It's,
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Okay, I'm going to make a motion.
okay, because I don't know how to make one yet. I'm still learning, so you go ahead.
I'm going to move that we recommend approval of the R15 zone for this property.
I second.
Can we have a roll call?
Marcy Baker,
Yes.
Kim Blackerby,
Yes?
Josh Brainerd,
No.
Patty Crowan,
Yes.
and he's not here, Miles Schlesinger,
Yes.
Max Smith.
Yes.
Okay. Phew. This is a tentative decision by the Planning Commission, so the staff will prepare a final order for adoption for our next meeting, and then it will be, I guess, scheduled for City Council, correct?
Madam Chair, it is already scheduled for City Council April 13th.
Oh, okay. All right. That's it. Thank you. All right, where's my agenda? Do we have any old business?
We do not have any old business.
Do not. Okay. Any new business?
I cannot think of any new business off the top of my head.
All right. I'm hoping we will schedule some planning commission training now that we are up to our full complement.
Yes, we will have that training on March 3rd.
Okay.
That is our next
Okay.
Planning Commission meeting.
So all of you newbies, be sure and be here for that,
All right.
all right?